there were discussions about altering the security forces curriculum to remove teaching ambushes. And with the reason being, well, security forces hasn't done an ambush since, Vietnam or whatever. And I was like, in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, what's a traffic stop? If me and Trent are rolling together on a patrol and, he's like, hey, we got to get this guy, like, matches the description, very suspicious. Let's get our game faces on. He gets out and I get out. Well, what do we do?
Yeah.
I don't follow him. No, we're setting up an ambush. Like, yeah, it's a traffic stop. No, I got to be able to support him. He's got to be able to support me.
One's ready. One's ready. Go. 1, 2, 2.
Grind every day, yeah, we aim for the stars. Feet on the ground, but our heads are on Mars. Visions of glory, sweat on our skin. We craft our story, determined to win. We the titans, with hearts untamed. We face the giants in this battling game. Our dreams are loud, echoes of them remain. We stand as one, heading for the Hall of Fame. We chase the lights till the final whistle. Believe it when we say we never settle. We chase the lights till the final whistle. Believe it when we say we never settle. We did it, we did it, we did it.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the One's Ready podcast. You're in the team room. This is our pre-roll. Before we get into this next episode, though, would love you guys to go check out operatortrainingsummit.com. It's our new site where you can register and sign up for any of our operator training summits. And if you haven't seen them, that is our 2-day events. First day is, well, as long as scheduling works out and all that kind of stuff, right? But the first day is all of our land-based stuff. So you're talking about rucking, running, mobility, calisthenics, grass and gorilla drills, nutrition. And usually we have a recruiter out there as well. So if you have questions for a recruiter, you can work through it that way. The thing is that it's Taylor Starch. Okay. So we've got, you got Aaron, you got Trent, you got Chris Thomas. They're great dudes. They're okay, I guess. But the real moneymaker is Taylor Starch. He's the mad scientist when it comes to anything strength and conditioning, long range cardio, all that kind of good stuff. So that's like one day is completely him. Now, some of us help out where we can because we're a bunch of Luddites and all that kind of stuff. But the beauty of it is if you're somebody who is prone to shin splints, prone to knee pain or anything like that, Taylor has things that can help you navigate that and hopefully get it better. And if not, maybe prevent it, especially if you're worried about it. Now, the second day is 10 to 12 hours in the pool working on efficiency, right? But we're doing a whole lot of water con and underwater stuff. So we're looking at underwaters, mask and snorkel recovery, how to clear your mask, bobbing or drown proofing, treading water, buddy breathing. And usually we throw in some 10-ups or something like that. So would love for you guys to come out. Our next one, it is in Vegas, 20 and 21 December, and we'd love to have you out. That is operatortrainingsummit.com. Now, on to our guest. He reached out to us after Master Sergeant Dan, a CCT, was on our show, episode 41 and 520. So those are kind of the preamble to this episode. I highly recommend checking those out. And what he does is he talks about the things that happened in Manda Bay during that attack in 2020. Well, Major Mike Voto reached out and wanted to come on and tell his side of the story and where the Air Force and security forces leadership got it wrong and kind of went down the wrong path. Now, I've got to caveat this because he pinged me afterwards because he forgot to mention it, right? So I want to read this here, but he says, I failed to thank all the people that did stand up for me and stand by me, that gave me the benefit of the doubt. I don't know if they would be and then he says, I don't know if there'd be a way to incorporate it. So he sends his kind regards and his sincere thank yous to everybody that stood beside him and stood up for him and believed him in the things that he said, even though he was going against the Air Force grain. And we talk about that. So highly recommend sticking around and watching it. And we'll see you there. Later.
That was a pretty good workout.
Awesome.
And both of you guys are white monster in it right now.
That's right. Gonna be a good one.
Yeah.
All right. Well, welcome back, everybody. Appreciate you joining us. This is the One's Ready podcast, and we are in the team room, and it's Trent and I. And then we've got right now Major Mike Voto.
Voto.
Hopefully, I'm saying Voto. Okay,
Yeah.
Cool. Great.
Not like the Reds first baseman, but
Yeah. And so, let me just kind of give a back brief of how we got to where we're at. So we've done 2 episodes on the things that happened in Manda Bay. And this was 2019, 2020, right?
yeah, 2020, 5 January.
Yeah. Right. 2020. And we've had a Master Sergeant Dan, who's a combat controller, and he's still active duty right now. So that's why I'm just kind of leaving his last name out of there. But and he had come on and he had talked about stuff. And then from what I understand is you had a friend of yours showed you the episode, and then you reached out to us and you were like, I'm so glad you guys had him on. And then there was a whole bunch of other stuff that followed on that I don't want to get into. Like, I want you to say it because there's no way I'll be able to capture it. And so first off, welcome to the show. And like, how did we get here?
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. Like I said, I was we're really appreciative and grateful. That this was kind of being talked about. My background. I actually come from a military family. I'm 4th generation. My great grandfather immigrated over from Italy, and then World War I popped off, and so the American government was like, "We need you," and so he went. Right. So and I have a lot of service on my mom's side too. But my father was a Marine back in the 80s, and grew up in that household, and I was like, hey, you know what? The military is for me. This is this is my calling. I did ROTC at the University of Cincinnati, and then I actually went to Crow selection in 2009 out at Fairchild, and washed out, and then got security forces, and had been that for the past 15 years.
Nice. So serving your country honorably and doing the security force thing. Actually, we've never had a security forces officer on the show. And you guys do seem to be like, if security forces and maintenance or maybe services, I'm not sure which one, I think it's security forces is pretty much always the largest career field in the Air Force, but you don't see security forces officers that often.
No, when I was looking at some of the recent manpower studies, I think our enlisted officer ratio was somewhere north of like 40-1. And then the next closest was like CE and then maintenance, and theirs was like 10-1 and 8-1.
Yep.
Jeez.
I remember when we were in Kuwait during one of our rotations, and the security forces squadron asked us to come over to talk to some folks that were thinking about going Stowe or Crow or whatever. Mm-hmm. So we're just there with the officers, and there's like 6 people showed up. We're like, hey, where's or even fewer, and we're like, where's everybody else? They're like, this is it, bro. Mm-hmm. This is how many officers we have to oversee, like, all these different squadrons of folks and doing all these things. But I will say, as a person that thinks that people should earn their paychecks, the officer responsibility on security forces side, I think, is a lot closer to the way it should be. And it kind of forces you to be a little bit different and to use your senior NCOs, I think.
Mm-hmm. Man, that's a wild ratio. But and to your point, Trent, like for security forces to potentially lose 6 officers, that's a massive loss.
Yeah.
So go ahead, sir. Continue, please.
Yeah. So then I've been a bit of an anomaly and fortunate because I've done a lot of different assignments. A lot of officers they get pigeonholed one way or another in their career route, and maybe they get stuck doing nuclear security, flight line operations, or just law enforcement. And I got to do a little bit of everything. So I started out in Montana, working in the missile field, doing security for the ICBMs out there. Didn't really like that, and I was like, how do I get out of here? And I got orders to Osan, Korea, which was fantastic. So after that, my fall on was the 20th. So I did some time down in Georgia, got to go to airborne, got a couple deployments out of that. Both of those were to Jordan. That's where we were rotating in and out of at the time. Had enough of the 20th, went back to Korea, then decided I hadn't seen Europe yet. Then I got orders to Germany from Korea.
Jeez.
Awesome.
Yeah, which leads us to all of this because I was on the headquarters staff at USAF Africa, but because the Air Force likes to be the Air Force and do things different than the other service branches, we were all kind of under one umbrella, whereas all of the AFRICOM stuff was down to Stuttgart.
Stuttgart.
Yep, and but I mean, so I got to be in Germany for a year and a half, and then my 06 came up to me and one day and was like, hey, we see according to your records and because I was in the AFAF cell on the staff, there really wasn't a whole lot going on in Africa, relatively speaking, in that time frame. So this is like I checked into the staff at 2018 and in 2018. And then I caught this deployment at the end of 2019 to go be the DFC down in Kenya.
And what's DFC?
Defense Force Commander. So I was going to be the guy that the security plan and its execution rested on for day-to-day operations or contingencies or emergencies.
Okay. So base defensive Manda Bay kind of stuff, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So I, this being my third deployment, and me being a senior captain at the time, I was like, okay, I got some homework to do. I had been in the seat doing stuff for all of AFAF. I hadn't, nothing new popped in my emails, and maybe this was a lack of due diligence, but I was still pretty new to the job when I got the tasking, and was like, okay, let me understand what's going on here. Let me ping the guy who was in the seat, because unlike Dan, we don't have as deep pockets, and so we can't do that kind of changeover, which is ideal. And actually, in a certain sense, I had some bad luck because we had just done our from the staff, we did our assessment rotation of all the installations and then the formal reports. So I dug that up as well, which was complete with pictures and that person's assessment on what they felt the status of the installation, the personnel, their readiness level. All that stuff was in that report on the high side, and then I'm picking people's brains who'd been on the staff longer than me. It's like, hey, it's been a little bit since I've done a deployment. It had been 3 years since I deployed at that point. But like in the midst of all of that, I go, okay, so when am I going to pre-deployment training? Guess what the answer was?
You're just deploying.
Yeah, they're like, sir, for security forces now, if you're an E7 or above, you don't go to pre-deployment training.
Oh my gosh.
And then then the icing on the cake is security forces trying to follow the direction of the Air Force, but solve the problem of the home station mission and doing things abroad or downrange. But the decision that had been made and executed at that time was, okay, guys, if you get a tasking, your pre-deployment training is you're going to go out to Fort Bliss and you're going to do the entire annual curriculum in like 2 to 3 weeks with no focus on the specific mission that you will be given at your location, nor preparation for a different environment. And when I was a little heated when all this stuff was going on, I noticed that we're not going to use strong language, but I was like, we haven't security forces hasn't freaking been in the jungle for 50, 60 years. I was like, why are we going out to Fort Bliss to train for something that's 2 degrees south latitude?
You'd be better off just going out there and zeroing your rifle when you get there and figuring it out.
Well, hey, I got a story about that too.
Funny enough, we did that.
Yeah. So, I tried to do my due diligence. And fortunately, my SEL, he was just down the road at Vogelway. So we got to meet up a couple times and kind of war game this and feel each other out and be like, okay, hey, where do we want to go with this? And so I do this as best I can. And I guess like providentially, I had, prior to going to Germany, I actually went out to Vegas and trained with PFC. And I did their full spectrum operators course, which that like kind of I evolved like maybe 2 or 3 times as a person. Like that really just like kind of expanded my mind compared to what we're able to train on in security forces. You're gonna there are a lot of people who mean well, and they you make the best with what we get or what we're able to make happen. But that was a game changer, and allowed me to, I think, have a better understanding of what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go with this tasking.
And in what way? What was it about that training that is different? Because the people hear from us a lot, and some of the stuff that we think is normal, like from regular like security forces, what is available, and then going through that training, what was the big change?
So it was there was a lot of dispelling and kind of a cold water of reality, right? So security forces guys, we we carry a gun daily, but the experience and confidence with those weapon systems is not what it should be. And I attribute a lot of that to one of the things I learned from PFC was they call it PUS, performance under stress. And doing stuff out with them, they tell you, hey, if you're introduced to a skill or a tactic and you want to ensure that, one, you have it down good, but then 2, to pressure test whatever that skill or SOP is, they want you to do something on the run, in the dark, alone, with a team, bilaterally, injured against the uncooperative. So, using those 7 metrics and applying those to the, rifle pistol skills I was learning, the team tactics that we were doing, that was quite different. Maybe not necessarily 180 degrees different, but it was far more different than what we were used to with security forces, which was, hey, you're going to go to a flat range, you're going to shoot at a paper target that is stationary, you are going to be stationary, or maybe take one step to your left or to your right to engage a series of targets. You're going to be on strict timelines, you have to follow orders, whereas with progressive force, like you're out in the desert of Nevada. Their range is carved into the side of a mountain. They have like 90 acres out there, and that's like it's pretty hellacious, and to navigate that terrain. But it was fantastic because I thought I was like okay at stuff, and it was like no, like, hey, we taught you how to hold a weapon, how to reload it, but now you're going to do it under knots. You're going to do it while you're running from this instructor holding a glow stick to that instructor, and you owe us hits on steel. So that's like the dynamic. Yeah.
Much different dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you can't overstate the importance of stress testing, right? Like opening up that window of tolerance for people. And I'm a huge security forces apologist on the podcast. Like I think it's I don't want to say it's a crap job. I just think it's a very important job. There's a lot of aspects to it that people don't understand, and y'all are just not resourced the right way. That's part of it, and part of it is just like everybody else, the constant reimagining of what security forces is as a whole. And then like, no, we're going to break out into all these different jobs. No, we're one thing again. Like we are cops. No, we are military. Like we are all these different things. So there's a lot of thrash within the career field, but it's like you do have people carrying weapons every day. And I think it cannot be overstated how important it is to get folks into a stressful environment, using their weapons, doing their reloads. Because like we've seen recently, like sometimes like it's not everybody. And I get that you want to like be like, well, everybody's not going to have to like pull their weapon and shoot at a small target that is, moving while your heart rate is jacked to 170. But when it happens, you don't want that to be the first time ever that you've tried to put rounds on target in a stressful situation.
Yeah. One of my previous commanders, one of the first thing he said at his change of command, and he proved it with how we carried things out. But he goes, I don't want defenders first time getting punched in the face when they're doing a traffic stop. It's like be expecting hard things, when you're not on duty.
Yeah, you never know when there's going to be somebody running a gate, and it's not always, we've had some in the last like 4 months. There's been some gate runners. There was just one I think last week at Eglin. There was one, I don't know, a month or so ago that was actually a type 1 diabetic that was having a hypo or something like that and was having a medical episode, and they just ran into the gate, luckily. And that's where that target discrimination comes into play, and those security forces dudes that were at that one for the medical thing. Well, wait a minute. I can't remember if they killed him or not, but I think they did not, if I remember right. But, we here in Nellis just 6 months ago, we had an old man that had somehow gotten on the base using his driver's license and was wandering around the A10s. Like, he had dementia. Like, so there was nothing there, but he was driving around A10s on the flight line. I mean, you just never know when it's going to be a real threat or when it's going to be kind of a humanitarian kind of thing like that,
Well, yeah. And your higher level of confidence and the more skills that you have, it gives you more bandwidth to determine whether this is a person that's having a diabetic episode or if I need to put rounds in this person right now, and round out that skill set beyond just like your firearms. And it gives you that confidence instead of just being like, if this person's uncooperative, like, what do I have? Like, they only taught me how to shoot, like, or I wasn't great at combatives, or we haven't done combatives in like 8 months, and I feel threatened. So what am I going to do? I'm going to drop a magazine into this person.
Yeah. Well, and
sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. Because that had brought up another good point as well was, so because of also I was on the staff, I heard some conversations that were happening at the security forces level, and at our colonels and chiefs meeting prior to me getting there. I don't know if it happened in 2018, but I know this talk happened because I heard it from my chief. But there were discussions about altering the security forces curriculum to remove teaching ambushes. And with the reason being, security forces hasn't done an ambush since, Vietnam or whatever. And I was like, in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, what's a traffic stop? If me and Trent are rolling together on a patrol and, he's like, hey, we got to get this guy, matches the description. Very suspicious. Hey, let's get our game faces on. And, he gets out and I get out. Well, what do we do?
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't follow him, no, we're setting up an ambush. It's a traffic stop, but no, I got to be able to support him. He's got to be able to support me.
Yep. Yeah. Also, really, no security forces people have been in an ambush or set up an ambush or anything like that since Vietnam. I'm not sure that's true. All right. I'm not saying there were security forces all over Iraq and Afghanistan running around outside the wire all the time, but some of y'all got into some pretty sketch situations where things went wild. And so, like, no offense, Chief, but you may not know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
so-
he's just thinking of it from the Vietnam perspective, because that's what he was in. That was his last ambush.
yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that was kind of it wasn't and maybe that was foreshadowing. I don't know, because I'd heard that prior to me being told I was gonna deploy. But so as I'm getting closer to this date too, and I had been asking this all along as well, but AFF had a lot of manpower issues, which was a struggle to solve as well. And the long story short on that, what I found out was there was some handshake deal done in the Pentagon, and one general said to another, like, yeah, bro, CONUS doesn't have to worry about Africa. Like, Europe will handle that. I don't know all of the context about it, because I didn't hear the full story. Plus, it's been 7 years since I heard that conversation, so you'll have to forgive me. But that more or less was the gist of it. So when we were trying to fill the taskings for the AFF locations, Air Forces Africa, I should have clarified what it was. But we were getting constant reclamas from home station saying, "Hey, we can't fill this billet. We can only provide X number of personnel, or we can't provide any personnel." And originally, when I was supposed to go in there, it was supposed to be supported in like Dan said, we were kind of small. Like, it was 84 guys, including myself, 84 cops. It was only supposed to be 4 locations. Guess how many bases I had when I was boots on the ground?
10.
9.
Jeez.
Pretty close.
For 84 people?
I had 9 different groups of people that never trained together, that were getting last minute training. Maybe they didn't even attend Bliss. And this one was one of my favorites, because I got pretty fired up over this. I had a team from one of my Germany teams. I had to call their supply section because they sent their guys to Manda Bay, Kenya, without wet weather gear or a spare pair of boots. Like, these studs came into theater with one pair of boots. So I'm on the phone with this senior, and I was like, again, I was using colorful language. That was probably the most I had been temperamental in my time. Like, I usually try to be pretty calm. It's not my job to get in people's butts over things. But I was like, senior, look, I don't care. I'm not here to try to ruin people. I want a solution. Like, what can you get us, and how fast can you get it to us? Like, that's what we need to find. Okay, you don't need to try to defend the problems that you were dealing with at your home station. I don't care, man. Like, these guys need this equipment, because we were there for October to April. That was their winter, or their rainy season. And I've been in Georgia, and I thought I got dumped on there, but
I saw a picture of Africa one time, and it was a desert. So
right.
I don't know why.
Oh yeah.
Well, I don't want to talk about it too, real quick, folks. So a reclama is, so if the unit that's downrange puts in a request for a human for a deployment, the reclama is them saying, no, we can't fill that position. And then when it gets all the way up to the Pentagon, the folks up there are looking at all the requests for bodies, and they prioritize those. So when you talk about, 2 generals fist bumping in the hallway and being like, hey, we're not going to prioritize the Air Forces in Africa over these other things that we have, because it is a math game, and it's not an easy math game to solve when you're talking about manpower. It seems like they had made a decision to not prioritize the security forces manpower being fully loaded for the Africa mission.
Yeah, and it didn't help, because the strategic plans for Europe at that time, they had they had a couple really big things going on at that time, geopolitically, and then as well as restructuring and moving assets around in theater. Yeah, so Europe was already kind of like they were already kind of breaking the bank manpower wise, because we were supporting projects for aircraft, moving all over the place. Yeah, so it was kind of a perfect storm of things.
Well, can I just, so I have an ism about AFRICOM in general. AFRICOM being in Europe, like nobody on the staff there feels the heat from Africa. And so like it's a crap situation where we'll have people on continent, and no offense to some offense to the folks on staff up there, but they'll be like, they're heading out for the weekends. They're going to soccer games. Yeah. They're having a great time doing what they're doing. And they're not actually that close to the problems that are happening on the huge continent that is Africa, with the myriad of different issues that are happening. And it just doesn't seem like it's been prioritized ever. And having the staff sit in Europe, and I get it's hard to drop an entire staff of people on continent, but like just that separation seems to just be, it does not help. Mm-hmm. And Africa is constantly forgot. We keep asking more and more of the people that we send down there. And then there's a lot of places where they're still not getting combat pay, even though people are dying. So like it's just, the AFRICOM is a mess.
Mm-hmm. And it always has been since it stood up, whether it was SOC Africa or Special Operations Command Africa or AFAF. Like it's, and it's under resourced. It's not that it's bad people, but there's just, because before AFRICOM stood up, it was all done by USAF and SOC Europe or Special Operations Command Europe and that kind of stuff. So, it's not like they added more billets or anything like that. They just carved out the people that were already doing Africa stuff, and they're like, all right, now you're solely focused on Africa instead of Europe and Africa. Mm-hmm. And to your ambush point too, I mean, like, man, or at least the argument, and I know what they're saying. They're like, well, not that much stuff happens on the continent of Africa, like in terms of combat operations as you would see it and relate it to Afghanistan and Iraq and Syria, that kind of stuff. But like just before this, so that was 2020. In 2017 was the Tongo ambush. Again, nobody expected that. And then nobody expected Manda Bay, because Manda Bay is a resort town. Like, why would anything ever happen there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but everybody in Africa is so far away from everything. It is hard to explain how huge Africa is, and you're sending people out there. You're like, oh, like not that much happens down there. Yeah, but you're 12 hours from anything.
A flight, 12-hour flight.
Yeah.
And that was a point I tried to harp on folks, like to get some semblance of a mindset. I was like, guys, like, we're it. Like, it's a 6-hour flight from Djibouti to us. Mm-hmm. And that's not including like the lead time to prepare that, whether it's the personnel, the aircraft, the crew, the resources to get that here. Like, so we're looking at that, perfect situation. Maybe everything is already staged. We still have, plus 6 hours from the, bang before we can expect any kind of help. Or to get into like recuperation, that kind of phase.
Yeah.
Yeah, to put in perspective, in Afghanistan, like when you start talking about golden hour and large bases and all the other stuff, like you had Mazar-e Sharif, you had Kandahar, you had Bagram, you had Jabad. Like there's all like these larger bases within a certain distance of most of the combat operations that are happening. So if things went sideways, people actually were standing by most of the time to go get the fellows and get them back to a higher level of care or whatever else needed to happen, or QRFs. And it's just not that way in Africa. And I think it's a huge foul on the folks that are throwing our folks out there without taking all these considerations into account. I know there's things that we have to do, but just the fact that it doesn't even seem to be acknowledged most of the time as a huge issue is the biggest problem that I have.
Yep. And that much worse on the conventional side of things, because like, again, I'm kind of going back when I was working on the staff before this deployment. I'm talking to the master sergeant and the tech sergeant that were kind of juggling everything that was going on, because they're there was a little bit of a gap between my predecessor and myself. So I didn't get any left seat, right seat for that position. And they were like, yeah, sir, we've been working XYZ things for 7-8 months. Oh, wow. Okay. I was like, so when are we, what are our get well dates? So what's our plan forward? Like, what do I tell the colonel if he asks me about, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, well, sir, the Africa's, it's a, it's a jungle. They kind of like, sometimes they're really cooperative, sometimes, not so much. And yeah, it was a good learning experience. But it was, it was challenging.
So let's go to the ambush, the attack.
Yeah.
I'll say ambush, but I mean, I don't know if we'll just say attack.
There's not been any ambushes since Vietnam, Peaches, ever.
Yeah.
It's never going to happen again, and we don't need to train anybody on it.
I don't want to go against the narrative here.
Well, yeah. It actually like gets even better than that, Trent. So I get in there, and because that is such a small footprint, it was one in, one out. So there's like,
for the boots on ground.
Yep. So we had to phase in the next rotation. Yeah. So like, so your handover was with somebody who may be leaving like, in the next couple days, or, like we'll give it maybe a week. We were getting deliveries once a week. And so over the course of a month, which by the way, it took me 2 months to get all of my guys, because there was a team from Fairchild that stayed on for like an extra month, because of the reclamas. Yeah. So,
jeez.
Yeah. So I didn't even have the full team there when I showed up. Which is, kind of spectacular. But anyway, so I get there. I was like, okay, a lot of the stuff hasn't been ideal. But there's some great resources and opportunities here. And we had a 221 meter range that was northeast of the airfield. And I was like, and then I talked to my my combat arms guy, the CADAM guy. He goes, yes, sir. We got a whole bunch of ammo in these cases in our storage here, because we were doing the storage for the other teams as well, for their explosives. And I was like, sick. Like, we're gonna do live fire maneuvers. Like these guys are gonna do stuff that they've never done before. And and I don't even have to do it because I know I've got 2 soft elements that would be chomping at the bit to do this as well. Like, granted, like they were they were pretty busy with stuff, but I met with their OICs. When I got in, like, hey, I'm the new guy. This is kind of quick who I am, but this is what I would like to do. If you guys have time, like, could you do stuff with my guys? Like, yeah. And so some of that stuff we didn't get a chance to move out on, because of the timeline. But I just tried to see everything as opportunities. I was like, okay, whatever. This isn't great, but we're gonna make the best of it. So I get in. It was like first week of October. Was when I was boots on the ground, and unlike John Wayne Green Berets, where he was able to get a bulldozer and push the jungle back right away, 300 yards. I was like, hey, so what's up with all this brush and stuff? They're like, oh well, blah 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 blah. Okay, cool. Like, I guess this is Africa. And I was like, okay, well, how many times have you guys like, gone out and just done like little foot patrols around the airfield or our postage stamp? Like, because we were on the northwest end of the entire camp, but our section butted up against like the actual Kenyan perimeter. Like, we had a road on the outside. Well, there was a road in between our fence line and then the Kenyan fence line, but then there was a road along the Kenyan fence line as well on the north side that went east-west. And they were like, no, sir, like, hadn't thought of that, never did. I was like, cool. Like, I was like, how many of you guys have done it? And so of those 84 guys, and this being 2019, I didn't have very many guys that were long in the tooth and that had deployment experience. I think maybe 2 or 3 of my senior NCOs and maybe one of my tech sergeants. He was a K9 handler, but he was an assistant flight chief. Had deployments before. So I had 5 guys, including myself, that had deployments or deployment experience. And I was like, yeah, like, okay, so let's get this into our battle rhythm. Like, you guys need to know how to do this stuff. And it's, give us an opportunity to train on that, which, all these initiatives I was trying to take to be, proactive, all like, it was a terrible experience because they had, beautiful location, Wi-Fi everywhere, strong Wi-Fi. We had opportunities to go to the beach, and they're like, "What's this sir doing? Like, he's ruining the fun." I was kind of like Chicken Little. I actually wrote on my whiteboard because I heard it so often. Nothing ever happens. I like, if I could have tally marked that thing, maybe I would have had like a couple dozen tallies. Like the amount of times in meetings or in passing, I heard nothing ever happens here.
This is a Hollywood movie. Yeah, this is the build up that every movie. It's like nothing happens. Don't worry about it.
Black Hawk Down. It's Gothic Serpent. We'll be out.
And it kind of all culminated. So on leading up to Christmas, there was the camp commander wanted to have a Christmas party on the beach, and I was like, this is what it would take to make it happen, but I don't think it's a good idea. And then on top of that, like the SEL, who this was her first deployment as a senior, and also like she predominantly spent her time in like the training world, but like formal Air Force schooling, and she was coming off of rotation as a Airman Leadership School commandant. So her priorities were, hey, let's, these guys, we have good internet. These guys need to be, focused on their life and, doing these college courses, doing CLEPs. I forget what that's. Yeah.
Dang it, senior.
I forget what that stands for, but the
college CLEP thing.
Yeah. I forget what that stands for, but the testing to get college credit. Like that was the priority was making life easy. Because we were so far away and this was so hard. And actually, I don't know if this made it into the report or not. But I had heard this from my predecessor, and like when I was on the ground, and I heard this from the people at the embassy because we did do one trip to the embassy because we had a lot of like contractual paperwork that had to be renewed. And somehow one of the people at the embassy had signed up for and enabled mid tours. You could take a 96-hour mid tour to Mombasa for a 6-month rotation. That was happening maybe a year and a half, maybe 2 years prior to when I got there. I think a year and a half. So dudes were and gals at their 3-month mark, somewhere between 3 and their redeployment, they could out of pocket, they could pay for it, like an all exclusive, pass to a resort in Mombasa. So that kind of just adds insult to injury with this whole situation. But like that was like, kind of the uphill battle that I had and was trying to overcome.
And you're 100% right, because there was a mentality, and there probably still is, because complacency kills, and okay, yeah, when you relate it to an Afghanistan, Iraq, and stuff like that, yes, it is slower, but then that's the whole point, is you get lulled in this false sense of security, and then you get slapped in the face.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, so then leading up to that, they want to have this Christmas party, and even OSI was like, yeah, there's stuff in the area, but it's not. I don't remember the phrasing exactly that the agent used, but either it wasn't targeted at us, or we're not worried about it. It was something to that nature. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, yeah, thanks. Just kept the poker face, waited for everybody to leave. And I was like, hard, like non-concur, this is insane. Like, not only would we be susceptible to, stuff on the ground, but now we would have to worry about amphibious, because, it wasn't beyond these guys to, use boats and, pose as like fishermen or whatever, and, do whatever. No, this is silly. But yeah, so leading up to that though, and this is actually a pretty, funny thing as well. So Department of State at the time was doing a joint project with the Kenyans to help, build them up and stuff, and give them work. Well, so we had contractors on the DOS side, or I'm sorry, on the DoD side, then the DoD, but the DOS workers, they get the, hey bro, don't show up to work tomorrow text message. And the prior to that, so the 1st of January fell on a Wednesday, and I know because I was working one of the ECPs for my guys, because I was like, oh, like, yeah, hey, like, I'll work the holidays for them. I tried to, like, on the holidays, like, work for one of them. And so I was actually working at the airfield, and there was a lot of like Kenyan traffic, vehicle and aerial. And I was like, oh, I guess it's, that time of the month for the Kenyans, because they had a, and this schedule was staggered as well, but they were on a monthly schedule for guys to rotate home for their R&R from their duty location, which was Manda Bay. So 1 January, there's a lot of vehicle traffic, and, these guys are leaving, which, okay, well, what does that mean? Well, that means, our base strength is reduced now. There was at least like a platoon flight amount of guys, 40, 45, 50 guys that had departed. So, and then, you peel these layers back, and it comes out in some of the intelligence reports. Oh yeah, the Al-Shabaab was actually reconning you guys since November. So they knew, hey, 5 January is going to be, or at least post this rotation, that the Kenyans have, this is going to be good for us, because they're going to be reduced strength. And in the, pretty much the, the details and the order of battle that Dan highlighted, that unfolded, right? And, it was like, 5:30, is when, I heard the mortars, and then you rushed over to the talk, and then tried to get all that spinning up. But like that, God rest his soul. But with the army guys out there, they actually messed up the enemy's attack by spotting them. And because what they wanted to do was they wanted to mortar us first and try to pin down everybody, and so that way they could have complete, freedom of maneuver out on the airfield. And those airfield guys spotting them, disrupted that, which kind of, was ended up being, in a certain sense, a fatal mistake.
Yeah.
Can we go back just a little bit? I do want to talk about the attack like a lot, but like, I just want to say to the military folks out there, understand that the Department of State does not have the same goals as you do. And they will exert pressure on like your OSI guys and all this other stuff to downplay threats so that they can do the other stuff that they think that they're trying to do, and which bleeds over into some of the other stuff. But never mistake the Department of State for like an ally when it comes to the military mission in an area. But so like as you watch these, like, all these things fall into place, like it's Department of State has their thing that they're trying to do, the complacency of everybody else, and then these mortars start falling. These army guys luckily saw these dudes, but you guys are not in a great position, like to thwart this attack.
Yeah. But we did get lucky that, at least like a handful of the guys weren't out doing their their soft mission, which led to everything else. And it actually it was like a little bit after I was in there, you're checking out the cameras, hey, like what's going on the radio. The Marsoc guy comes in and it's like, hey man, my counterpart, hey man, what do we got? I said, hey, there's attack going on in the airfield, unknown number of enemy. I was like, what do you need? Recognizing what I was up against, I was like, dude, it doesn't matter, which I got crucified for this because I didn't train and enact like the integrated defense plan. It so all the this past 40 minutes of me explaining the situation, like no, I knew in that instant, I was like, hey dude, what do you need? Like this is my plan, this is what I'm gonna do, but like what do you need to win? And he was like, fist bump, all right bro, like we'll see you on the other side, and go to work.
Yeah. It's just okay. So you guys depart from there, and then kind of what happened. I mean, I guess we've kind of already talked. I mean, we talked about Dan and his team's perspective on what happened during the attack and stuff like that. And I don't know how much of it is different from what you know or what you experienced, but it was a complete disorganized, and again, it's easy to say that from hindsight. Any kind of attack, as soon as you get punched in the face, kind of thing, is like, okay, it's because you got a bunch of disparate people that are disorganized or disorganized. They're not from the same organization. They don't have the same TTPs or tactics, techniques, procedures, and standard operating procedures and that kind of stuff. So it's kind of it takes one person to kind of gather everybody and do that kind of stuff. And so, all right, so you departed with your Marsoc compatriot there, and then what happened?
So that was maybe about, by the time maybe that was like 5 minutes after I got there. So this was still before 6 o'clock in the morning. I was in the talk handling everything at Camp Simba until about like 11 o'clock, I think, is when they had they finished a handful of their stuff at the airfield. They felt confident things had been repelled. Bad guys were dead, collected. So he comes back and he goes, hey man, here's what's going to happen. And, I need the airfield to be secured until the 101st arrives. So when talked to one of my master sergeants, said, hey, we need, to get all our vehicles here and, X number of people, we're going out to the airfield for an unknown amount of time because we need to hold this because, reinforcements are on the way. So that was about 11:30. And then I was out on the airfield with that team from 11:30 until about 2, 3 in the morning. That was, I think, when the first planes started landing, when they did their those night landings. And then the Marsoc team lead, he did his handover with that company commander, and then they dipped, and then myself and my team were doing what we could to give them kind of the lay of the land. And I actually went out with their and placed them and was telling them about the terrain, the vegetation, whatever, so they could get into their priorities of work. And
the contractor, because if I remember right, it's either an army guy or a contractor that had fled and was hiding. Was he still missing at this point? I'm not sure if you know that.
So he was unaccounted for when I was out there. They found him, or he came back while I was out there, and then they went into treating him, all the medical stuff, and they actually got him on the bird and and sent him home after the 101st. Him and then the other contractor that was that had the burns or the other injuries.
That's right.
Those individuals got on that C-130 and left after it offloaded the 101st guys.
Okay.
And that was like, maybe, I know that was like a huge gap, 11 in the morning to 3 in the morning.
Yeah. And, a lot happens there, and there, I'm just trying to remember everything that Dan had talked about too, in terms of where people had gone.
Yeah. But so now I'll get into what didn't happen, what Dan had highlighted in his follow-on, which that arguably caused me a lot of or more distress than the actual incidents, and even at the for the sake of my own career. Which actually, hold on, before I get into that, while the 15-6 was going on, the Army level or DoD level investigation. So I'm writing my after action report, and again, I saw this as an opportunity, and I decided to take a very critical and as non-emotional look at it as I could. And I had this 2-page document where I was like, hey, I think the Air Force, let alone security forces, I think we strayed from the truth. Like, we're kind of getting this wrong. Here's some ideas on what I think we can do to fix this at relatively low cost, because we're always trying to save a penny. And I got a call on the SIPR line from my lieutenant colonel supervisor on the staff. And he said, hey man, what you're saying in this, like, you gotta officer talk it up, because people are going to get punched in the mouth. Roger that, sir. And I didn't. But at that point, I was kind of like, all right, well, I guess like everybody's going down and there's no saving it, because, how are you going to tell me that after all the stuff, that I had been through, like my pre-mobilization, my time on the ground, and then that incident.
And when you say all shirt up, I just want to make sure that at least the listeners understand. I think you mean, hey, we don't have problems, we have challenges, or we have opportunities. Like there's not a problem, right? That kind of thing.
And
Or
there's no
using
one
language.
person or organization that you can point the finger at. Like,
Right.
it's just,
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And
Okay.
and they had just, it didn't sit right with me, and that that at that point too, I was like, I don't care if how much flack that I catch, like this needs to be said. And thankfully that got kind of initially validated as well, because I like I sent it to my my peers on the soft teams, like, hey guys, it's like, is what I'm saying accurate? Because I also like detailed a bit of how the order of battle unfolded, and then I'll never forget this. One of the Army E8s, this Sergeant First Class Special Forces Ranger type, comes up to me, and he had a copy of my draft, and and he's like, hey sir, like, do you mean what you said in this? Like, absolutely. And he's like, good, this needs to be said.
So what essentially, what did it say in it? I mean, like, were you just
is and now where some of like the officer, some officerness did happen, but not in the way that you would expect it. So the battalion commander from that was doing the security forces operation, like the Army Sec 4, he was on the ground as well, like it on those first few birds that came in. And I went to his office, one of the offices of ours that he took over because he needed it. But I go and I'm talking to this lieutenant colonel right after I got this phone call from my supervisor, and I said, like, like that was almost my breaking point. Like, I just like almost couldn't get the words out. And I was like, hey sir, like, this is what I'm dealing with. Like, I need help. And so we talked through it for like a couple hours. And he like, he was even like stopping, getting phone calls and stuff, and or people coming in to like asking questions. And so we go over it, and the help, the elbow grease that he put on it was definitely like a lot better than than what I tried to put together. And but essentially, I was my first line was it said something to the effect of the Air Force inadequately prepares its members for warfighting. I was like, we lack an ability to train not only our hard skills, but we don't even train mentality and warrior spirit. It's not it's non-existent. And then I kind of unpacked that, and then I said, here are some ways I think that we can do this. It listed I listed PFC. I know I don't work for them. I'm not sponsored by them.
But if you like to, here's a promo code.
Not yet. Yeah.
But I I was like, hey, in the absence of funds, I can find POCs because of the relationship that I built with the soft teams. They're like, yeah, man, we would love to, practice what we're doing here, like home station. We would love to come out and train guys because, as you guys said, it's a chance for them to help the security forces guys overcome a lot of the problems and the biases and the negative connotation of security forces.
Well,
yeah, for relatively cheap too.
When you're there in the reality of it, right? Like when you're on a small base with people, it matters a lot less about like the home station, smack talking, and you're this AFSC and I'm that AFSC and you're the Army and you're the Marines. It's like, no, guys, like we are a small group of humans that are surrounded. And if something pops off, like I would feel better knowing that A, we know each other, and B, we all have like a level of understanding of what everybody's going to do or supposed to do to a certain extent when things start to go crazy. Mm-hmm. And when you don't have that, when you have zero level of trust or understanding of the different organizations that are with you, when the rounds start flying, like it just makes it way more stressful and disorganized and all that other stuff, because it's like, can I trust that guy over there to do what he's supposed to do or not? Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know. And so unless you have that like integration, that inner team training and all that other stuff, is everybody still working as individuals or individual small units trying to get after the same mission. And it's not very efficient.
So the kind of following this, and I'm kind of going back to your email, mm-hmm. which generated this entire thing was, so was it the follow-on? So you submitted the after action report. You didn't really change it. You didn't put more officer speak in it. Mm-hmm. It went up. Obviously, it wasn't popular, mm-hmm. like because now we're here. Mm-hmm. So were some of the issues or some of the fallout from this the hero tour that people were going on with medals that were or were not deserved, and then like how did that kind of play out?
Yeah. So the report, it started pretty quick at the end of January. I think they were on the ground. That team was on the ground to include like some guys from the FBI. They were there maybe like the 27th or the 28th of January. And then the report was, the report was completed in September. So right before I PCS'd from Germany to Vandenberg. And I wasn't allowed to look at it, read it, or I was told not to. But because of all of that, because of that entire situation, though, I was like, well, I kind of don't care, to a certain extent. I just want to get out of this situation and get somewhere new, and kind of like, put it behind me. So it wasn't until, let's see, a year and a half. So I got to Vandenberg in October of 20. So we're like, kind of coming out of COVID, although, California, they kind of held on to, a little bit longer than the rest of than the rest of the country. So maybe it was like 20, but I think it was under the second commander that I had out there. it had to have been like 2022. End of 21, early 22 was when this stuff with the talk of medals was coming up. And some of the folks had already put in and had been awarded them, like, folks from the medical team, which was like, yeah, like I get it. There's not really any, harboring any animosity or resentment or indignation towards them. But I was kind of curious, like, okay, those of us who were in like, the leadership element, like, I was kind of curious, like, oh, what's, happening with them? Well, that SEL made chief, and I don't know what award she put in for, but it's obviously not as controversial as, my guys at the time. Which kind of, gets into that, a little bit into that point, that Trent brought up, or what I wanted to say, like with what didn't happen. But yeah, so I'm hearing this stuff with medals being talked about and pursued. I was like, well, that's kind of weird. Everything I heard was like, no, like, this is going to be, kind of shut off. And, and then these three guys put in for it. Okay, cool, man. Like, what do you think you did? Because I read the drafts. Like, I knew what was on those. Like, I'd have to do a request and read like what actually got submitted and awarded. But in particular, like, the stuff that Dan covered, like, that didn't happen. Like, I knew where those three individuals were for almost the entirety of that incident. And
you talking about the 3 security forces dudes that Dan was talking about?
Yep. Yeah, I absolutely know where they were and what they did or did not do. And the one guy, the tech sergeant that had put in, he's maybe a senior now, but he was kind of like fast tracked, because he's doing the tour, as he said, and which, like I was kind of expecting that initially, because I was like, hey, like, this is a pretty big incident. How is security forces going to react to this? Like, I wouldn't have a problem talking to people and being like, hey, like, here's things you need to think about and make sure happen. Don't let what happened to me happen to you. Was, again, opportunity. That's what I was, kind of hoping for. Like, let's be better from this. And no, like, I was like, I was like, a leopard. I was, persona non grata, and nobody wanted anything to do with me. And it was, very, very difficult to kind of overcome that, in a certain sense. But yeah, the one of the more sad things while these medals were being pursued at home station, by the way, because I was telling those 3 individuals, when we were submitting these things, it's like, you need to change the verbiage in this, because like, you didn't do that. I was like, you think you could look these other people in the eye and tell them that you did this stuff? Like, you might lose some teeth. This is like, it's absolutely not true. Like there was one line from the younger guy's package. He wrote in there that he executed or demonstrated expert combat tactics when organizing the defenders that had consolidated at the airfield and some of the Kenyans. Well, okay, like, let's rewind a little bit. When I rolled up to the airfield at 11:30 ish, it was complete disarray, and I had like defenders running up to me like, "Sir, like, what's going on? What are we gonna do?" Like, looking around, like they weren't even in any type of like tactical formation. And like, and in in their defense, like, they weren't adequately prepared for this environment. And
it goes right back to what you were saying,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. And not that like that any of that isn't doesn't fall on me, like, to try to make use of the time and prepare them. Like, I'm not going to point fingers. Like it's to a degree, my fault as well. But I was like, again, using colorful language. I was like, are you kidding me, man? I was like, what deployment is this for you? Oh, this is my first or second one, sir. How many times have you been in combat? This is my first time. How would you demonstrate expert combat tactics your first time? and
Expert's a funny word. Expert is a funny word to use.
brother.
Yeah.
And but like it was, again, there were a lot of emotions and thoughts kind of colliding because as this happened, one of my senior airmen, he was on one of the teams from England. We were fortunate enough to send him home because his wife was pregnant, so he had a newborn, right? So he had 2 children under the age of 3. I don't know if his oldest was like 2, maybe. He gets orders to San Antonio, and unfortunately, he ends up taking his own life around the same time that this stuff with these medals were being pursued. So, like, okay, what are we doing? We got a guy that's getting, they're still trying to find somebody to fall on the sword, for what happened. We got kids that are struggling with the stress because of how inadequate the preparation was for war. And then now you got guys that are, chasing glory. And it was very, it was a mess.
Yeah, it's definitely not a great place to be in, and especially if somebody's feeling, I gotta imagine guilt or whatever feeling they are to be able to, self-delete, which is not fantastic at all, especially leaving a wife and children behind. That is not cool.
Well, I think for a younger guy too, I think everybody had that moment where you have to confront the reality of what the military is, especially through like some of these combat situations, and then you see who gets the medals and who doesn't. And like as a young person, like that was a very emotional time, I think, for a lot of us, like as you go through some of that stuff and you have big feelings about everything. And it's a very difficult time, and for this guy to not be trained, to not be ready, and then to see behind the curtain the way that it is in kind of like the worst possible way, and then to get thrown back into the regular world, like it's a recipe for disaster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then, so the let's see. So that that metal stuff, it comes to pass that 3 of those guys were awarded them. The one guy that messaged his wife, the one in particular that Dan had mentioned, and then the guy that I talked about, expert combat tactics. He's a CADM guy too, by the way. So.
Yeah.
Do you think the security forces career field or the Air Force wanted to push this as kind of like to gloss over and to put a shiny layer of paint over the Manda Bay stuff?
I don't know. I mean, that's a great question. I actually you'd never had thought about it from that perspective. Mostly because I saw it as those guys, and this might be presumptuous, as those guys take an opportunity because the roadblock wasn't in the way to keep them honest. So they did this stuff home station, and that's how all these medals got processed. But there's a chief who he's still on active duty now, but he had asked our top cop that question, General Collins at the time. He was like, "Hey, sir, like we got a guy." Talking about me, we got a guy that's like, pretty much like his career is done, and being the scapegoat for this. So we'll lead off with that, like that's the base, and then, but we're going to turn around and also say, hey, 3 of his subordinates excelled in their duties and deserved this medal that even like some of those other guys, like some of our, the other guys from the other teams were denied.
Yeah.
It's like make it make sense. Like the math isn't working here. What are we really prioritizing with this?
And so how has this impacted your career now?
So it more or less, that was kind of like the writing on the wall. I didn't have anybody that said, "Hey, Michael, this is how you're going to recover from it." Or these are things you can do to recover from it, should you choose, or even, like, hey, start looking for other work because, your time is, it's limited. And, I get out to California and I was like, okay, well, eventually I'll find out like what's in this report. I'm just going to try to put my best foot forward and, and then, finish, finish my time, was my original intent. And, but I get out to, California and, I started out as like the director of operations. So I was the 2IC for our unit out there. And it's one of the largest units we have other than Andrews on the East Coast. We have 550 defenders at that unit. And, like, again, to the rarity thing, we had myself, the commander, an ops officer, and we had one lieutenant. So we had 4 officers for 550 people. We did get a few.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we did get a few lieutenants eventually, so they got to go to flight. But but yeah, so I he was trying to tap into the officer network and our what they call DTs, development teams, and see like, okay, hey, what's being said, or or what are what's the brass valuing, what can I do to again, they kind of like build this credibility, because I was really just like kept in the dark, like more or less, like if people the way it felt to me and appeared to me, if people didn't want to associate with me in any capacity, they wouldn't. That was my interpretation of it. I don't want to speak on behalf of others, but that's kind of how it felt. So what that cascades into is fast forward, let's see, maybe 2 or 3 years, when I was lieutenant colonel eligible, and I was like, well, I'm definitely not making it the first try, because once the 15-6 actually concluded, I was given disciplinary paperwork from a 2-star at IMSC in Colorado. IMSC is swine by they're like they're equipping and organization function in the Air Force.
Yeah.
I can't believe I'm forgetting.
I can never remember what
I'm looking
IMSC
it up
stands
right
for
now.
either.
Air Force Installation and Mission Support Center.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great.
So somehow it got determined through the DoD, and then passed to the Air Force. Like, okay, hey, our determinations are these people need to be held accountable. Like, do it as you see fit. So I get a memorandum to my group commander. I get called in his office, and he has said, "Hey, know you're dealing with a lot, but hey, sorry, here's here's an LOR for everything that happened. You have 5 duty days to write your rebuttal for it." All right, cool. Some random 2-star. I didn't even know this guy existed.
What about, did anything happen to like the base commander? Because we know the SEL went on, made chief.
Yeah.
It just seems like you were a captain at the time.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to crap on captains and how much they're actually responsible for things, but you're pretty low down the chain still.
Yeah. I want to say, if I recall correctly, the base commander, she got in trouble as well. Well, she didn't get like
In trouble, but
yeah, but she was held accountable. Is what's the finding? I don't know what that determination was, but I'm pretty sure she had some kind of disciplinary paperwork as well.
Okay.
So yeah, to my knowledge, those were the only people. I don't know like how far up the chain that went. But yeah, because I definitely don't think our deployed chain of command. I can't speak to that accurately because I don't know. But
what did they say that you did wrong?
So, it was under the umbrella of dereliction of duty, and I had, in light of my experience, I had inadequately trained my people and execute through execution of the integrated defense plan. Because as the investigation says, and you can even find the open source, like the unclassed version, it states in there, like, yeah, we as a team did one tabletop exercise, which Dan talked about, which had to do with it wasn't even I think it was just IDF and direct fire at the airfield. I think that was the incident that we covered. Which it was true. Like, yeah, I didn't do what was stated in the integrated defense plan. I had my reasons for it. I was like, no, like or how are you how are you reasonably expecting me to train on a defense plan in the time frame allotted, as well as get these people into a warfighting mindset? So kind of like there was a soft challenge, like there was a soft part of it and a hard part of it. Like yeah, sure, we could have done the drills, but again, that's where it says hey, that was something that was my fault. We didn't get enough reps in. And not trying to make excuses, but I was trying to build a warrior mentality. Because we once a cycle, I would have my guys. Well, or at the time, the frequency was once a month. But on an off day, because I also had just gotten my basic instructor cert for Krav Maga, so we were doing Krav, and then we were also doing I brought my handbook with me from the full spectrum operators course. So we were doing the dry reps to lead up to a range day. That was my vision. And actually, the one of the CPR guys that was there, he was a part-time instructor for a while. We became good friends. We still stay in contact. We were in the the bathroom one day, and I look over, I saw his hat, and I was like, it was one of my off days. I was like, hey man, that's a cool hat. And I had the same one. He goes, oh yeah, I'm a part-time instructor with them. And so he helped me build the curriculum and set up how we were going to do this live fire training. And so I'm eternally thankful for that he was there and helped enable that. And then also him being a CPR guy, it's like, okay, well, cool. Now we have all the medical risk, kind of covered down. If and when something were to happen, in that alternate future where we were training on that range.
Yeah, man, I gotta say, all this is extremely unfortunate. How, you being honest and calling out stuff and not willing to, for lack of a better word, bend the knee to change your story and to hold other people accountable, and also for you to get held accountable, receiving that LOR from the 2-star, and thanks for doing it. Thanks for it's because it's not an easy thing to do, right? And it's essentially, and these are my words, not yours, so please correct me if I'm out of line, but it's essentially kind of put the nail in the coffin of your career. And I know that we talked about it before we recorded, but you are days away from not being Major Voto anymore, but now being Mr. Voto. And I got to think that a lot of this stems from this event and you holding yourself and then others accountable for all this. And so we definitely appreciate it. And, I mean, I definitely don't want to put any words in your mouth. So is there anything else that you want to, throw out there?
Yeah. So with that back and forth, I was able to get them to concede a little bit. So I did get my LOR downgraded, but that's still even though, the severity of it, diminished, there were, it was still the nature of that incident was kind of well, yeah. Whatever.
And for an enlisted person to get an LOR, okay, cool. But an officer, that's a big no-no.
Yeah. But to your point, I with my current job, I work with a lot of guys that were prior commanders and prior chiefs. I work in anti-terrorism presently, and they were keeping pretty up to date with it, like as all this stuff was unfolding, big picture. And I've had they've had a lot of talks with me, and they're like, yeah, it was, it was kind of done, once we saw how this was being handled. They're like, yeah, sorry, brother, like, it was just, it shouldn't have happened, but this is what's happening.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. So, well, sir, I wish you the best going forward with all this. And again, I appreciate you coming on and telling your story and that kind of stuff. And yeah, wish you the best moving forward. I have no doubt you'll be successful. If somebody who is rooted in virtue and honesty and integrity is doing what you're doing, which you have obviously shown, like, you're going to be just fine. Not that you need my encouragement or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah, no worries.
You're really chiefing them up right now, aren't you? Yeah.
Well, hey, listen, we all have opportunities, okay? And challenges are out there. Yeah, I'm not doing that. All right, everybody. Sir, really appreciate you joining us. Everybody else, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and we'll see you later. See you.
Later, y'all.